Hi guys, welcome back to Jewish Agnostics. This is episode 7 with Pastor Dr. Rex Walker. So I'm Stephen Getz, that's Azalan.
And I'm Azalan. And so, Dr. Walker, could you tell us a bit about yourself? Just like a little quick biography before we move on to the questions.
Well, I grew up in this part of North Carolina. Lived here all my life. I was very fortunate. My dad didn't have a lot of money growing up, and he worked 3 different jobs and became a pilot. And I got to see a whole lot of the world through that. He was a corporate pilot, flew for a parts company, and he flew till he was 75. Just a few years ago was still the pilot for a local gas company here. So got exposed to a lot, everything from the woods to high technology.
Yeah, so Dr. Walker is the senior pastor at East Elkin Baptist Church, a life coach, public speaker, vice president of Piedmont College of Theology, vice president of Peace for Israel, a professional land surveyor, a pilot, geomorphologist, and the founder of Big Eagle Surveying, PLLC, which is a land surveying company. So as you can see, he is not just a pastor, but a man of many traits and a jack of many characteristics. So with that said, we can move along with the questions. So for our first question, we have, what do you think is the largest misconception regarding Christianity?
Actually, I think there are 2 major misconceptions. First of all, a lot of times, and especially in Israel, if you use the word Christian, they think Catholic, that you're associated Catholic. It happens a lot with Jewish people. And second of all, that Christianity, or more specifically a body of people who believe in Jesus, is a new and separate religion from what God instituted back in what you guys would call the Tanakh. And we don't view that. People are very studious in the Bible. We don't view it that way. And those are the 2 biggest misconceptions.
Yeah, like I can say, like, actually when Oz and I had a pre-meeting before this, we were discussing, like, because we were meeting with a pastor, and Oz had asked me, like, oh, is he Catholic? And like my automatic thought process was yes, because I guess, like, you just associate 2 and 2 together. But I guess that's not the case. There are, like, many, I guess, like, deviations in Christianity that, like, a lot of people just don't really know about.
Yeah, it's like one of those religions where you have the main, philosophical part, the main core of the religion, and then you have all these different interpretations, based around that, which I think is super interesting, by the way. In Judaism, you don't really have that. You have really only 3, and 2 of them came about really recently.
Yeah, well, I see in Rabbinic Judaism, I mean, you've got everything from the Hasidic, the Lubavitch, all the way to the Reformed, and you've got it's kind of the same way. The thing about it is, I guess you would, the world would say that I'm Baptist and think that's a denomination, but really, are you familiar with the term Protestant?
Yeah.
Okay, so the root word for Protestant is to protest, which takes you back to Martin Luther in like 1517, if I remember right. He protested against the Catholic Church
with the 95 Theses.
Yeah, and so he nailed that on the door and didn't realize that he was going to end up, starting something different from the Catholic Church, and then that all trickles down to even the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Anglicans, a lot of them that come down on that deal. But actually, a true Baptist only believes in 2 things: that the Bible is the inerrant, inspired Word of God, that it is exactly what it says it is, and we believe in full submersion baptism, basically the mikvah. And because all the others, Catholicism, they sprinkle, and but Baptists are full submersion. I remember my first really long discussion with a judicial rabbi, and he had his own shiva in Israel, and And after we got to talking, he said, "Wow, you know, this is the first time I've had a real conversation with a pastor." I said, "Well, this is the first real conversation I've had with a rabbi." And he was Orthodox, white shirt, black jacket, black pants. And when I began to explain to him, he realized that at the core, you know, there were a lot of differences in the fringe areas, but at the core, we really sought the same thing.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all Abrahamic religions at the end of the day. So.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Do you want to move on with the second question?
Yeah, sure. So for a second question, this sort of goes into deeper into really the part of the roots of Christianity. So why do you believe in Jesus? Like, is it in evidence? Is it a feeling that you just have, or is it something else?
Well, I think the best way to approach this is let's start with the last question. So, is it a feeling? Well, it's a very Jewish answer. Yes, but no. You don't get to put two Jews in a room, you get three opinions.
We are quite biased when asking
Yeah.
these questions, I guess.
Yeah. So, yes, I really can feel the presence of God in my life and what I believe, but it's not strictly based on a feeling. There is a lot of evidence out there. I'm talking about physical historical evidence, and no good historian would ever deny the existence of Jesus, or in Hebrew, Yeshua. The famous Jewish historian, you know, Flavius Josephus, I'm sure y'all are familiar with him.
Yeah.
You know, he wrote the Jewish Antiquities in 93 AD, but yet he was born in 37 AD. Even though he was born after the crucifixion of Jesus, he would have known people who would have personally heard and met Jesus. Eyewitness accounts, firsthand testimony, and he does speak of him in his Jewish Antiquities. There was a Roman senator and historian named Tacitus. He wrote what is called the Annals of the Empire of Imperial Rome around 116 AD. Even though he had a very disdain for the Christians of that day, what he says very much coincides with what the Bible says. And the Roman governor Pliny the Younger, y'all familiar with Pliny the Younger?
Yeah, Pliny.
Yeah. He's a Roman historian, and also Suetonius wrote about Christians and Jews. Now, if you remember my bio, that it shows, especially my undergraduate degree, and you know, you guys are going to publish on me. Now, I owned a laboratory. I'm a sedimentologist. We did a lot of studies, a lot of research stuff that I actually did a lot of the lab work myself and the outside gathering.
That's from
in
the
field.
North Carolina College of Theology.
No, that's my religious part, but in my work part, in my stream restoration part, yeah, very scientific. So, you know, it shows I'm very scientific. To be a surveyor is similar to an engineer. You're very anal, if you know what I mean by that. And so I'm a truth-seeking kind of mad scientific guy. So you kind of have to show me a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I totally
And
agree.
so I I believe, because I realize that the Bible was not only reliable but yet 100% accurate. I've taken on all challengers in the last 2 decades. I'd love for somebody to throw something out to me that tries to say the Bible's wrong or that has an error in it. And you know, and when I realized that in my heart that Jesus was 100% exactly who he said he was. So for me, yeah, it's a feeling that I can feel his presence in my life, but also I'm very convicted of this, and this is the reason I hadn't quit and I've stayed to it, is because this is my favorite quote, and my church can quote this back to you. I say it so much. A man that's not willing to change his own opinion loves himself more than the truth. let that sink in for a little bit.
Wow, a man who's not willing
Yeah.
to change his own opinion values himself more than the truth. Yeah, I mean,
Values his subjective viewpoints more than the objective
yeah,
viewpoints.
Yeah, you know, and so, you know, a lot of times we say the same things as long as we know the definition of what the other is using for that word.
yeah,
I've gotten really into etymology and root words and stuff and tracing things back over the years, and I love to parse out. I actually study and teach Paleo Hebrew. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. It's where the word pictures.
yeah, yeah,
Actually,
Yeah.
yeah, the letters, you know, were symbols.
yeah. Like in Greek, hieroglyphics.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
hieroglyphics.
very similar. So, and it's amazing that Hebrew is so perfect that the numerical system of it, the word pictures, how many words are related. When you look at it, it is phenomenal.
It's
I
really cool.
parsed out the word bara, created, and it is insane how many words are related to that word and how it relates to the Bible.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny because even completely separate from Christian scholars, there was the like creation of the text of the Kabbalah. So basically, what that is, it's like this sect of Jewish mysticism, and its first book actually talks about how different meanings could be found within the words. So I can't really think of any examples off the top of my head, but it goes back to that fact that all these words can be traced back to this word, which in turn gives it a new light or meaning.
Yeah, it gives it deeper roots. I'm not into mysticism, but those things that they do is amazing, and there's a lot of truth in that, and how you can prove things all the way through the scriptures on that. It's amazing. I find it very intriguing. I can bury my head into a Hebrew word for a long time.
yeah. What do you think, like, particularly about like Christian scripture points to like the truth of Jesus, like out of just pure curiosity?
All right, phrase that a little different so I know where you're coming from.
Like I guess like as a Jew, like I mean, the truth is obviously like held to the utmost respect. But even just finding that truth is sometimes like challenging. Like where do you look in terms of like Christian scripture, like maybe scripture that we don't know of? Because yeah, sure, like we can talk about Kabbalah, but like maybe something that you know of that maybe we don't, or something that you can like point to that would allow us to maybe like just study Christianity more in depth, or learn of like the truths that you say you find that point to the creation of, or the authenticity of Jesus.
Uh, I remember a guy one time. This is interesting. You will really like this. So when you guys hear Christians quote things, you go, okay, that's from the New Testament, or in Hebrew it's called the Brit Hadashah. So you hear these things back and forth, or like, how much Hebrew have you guys taken in school? I mean, do y'all speak Hebrew, or you just
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
Israeli.
all right?
it's like
So
9 years.
okay, so when you hear in English, you know, Bereshit bara Elohim et Hashamin, you know what I'm saying? In the beginning, God
Yeah,
created the heavens and
Yeah,
earth. You go, oh, that's in Genesis in English. And so when you read these things back and forth, but if you throw one out there, um, here here's a good example. So you know, like for God so loved the world, He sent His only begotten Son. All right, Tanakh
yeah.
or New Testament.
Pulling up from the Old Testament,
Uh,
from the Binding of Isaac, right?
well, yes, but
Like,
no. That's a quote directly out of the New Testament.
can you say the quote again?
So, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish but have everlasting life.
Uh-huh.
I only heard the first part. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking like Abraham and
Yeah.
Isaac.
So, yeah. So that is the theme of basically all Christianity, right? So, you know, here's another one. I'll read this to you, and you tell me New Testament, Old Testament.
Okay.
Who hath believed our report? and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised, speaking of this person, he is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. We hid it as our faces were from him. He was not despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. In other words, he bore our sins. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. Old Tanakh or New Testament?
New Testament, I think.
I would say the Old Testament, just because that would point to like more the truth of his creation.
Okay, it is. It's Isaiah 53. Isaiah 50.
So there's lots of similar reoccurring themes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that if anybody wants to know that is of a Jewish background, especially Israeli, you cannot approach Scripture to them with what Christians call the New Testament. You have to show them in the Old Testament if they believe in the Bible, because it is the root, and it's very, very clear in the New Testament that we are grafted in to the Jewish people. There is no Christianity.
That's the Old Testament? Wow. Yeah.
No, the New Testament plainly says that.
Oh.
We're grafted. I'm sure studying Jewish history, you know who Gamaliel is?
Gamaliel?
He's one of the most famous ancient rabbis, teachers. The guy who ended up penning most of the New Testament, the guy named Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. He sat at his feet. He was trained by him. Gamaliel said that you better be careful how you handle him, because you may find out that you're fighting God himself. And so that's the way you approach that. If what we believe, and I'll give you a little history of what happened, what we believe, if it does not perfectly line up with the Tanakh and the writings of the prophets, and then your view is in error, complete error.
Because the Old Testament is just built upon like the truths of the New. The New Testament is just built upon the truths of the Old Testament.
Exactly, and most Christians don't understand that either. I mean, you got to really dig in. Most Christians don't understand that everything that we have comes straight out of Judaism. When America was first getting started, you know who William Bradford was?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
that sounds very familiar.
Governor of Massachusetts, I believe, like 1600 or whatever.
William Bradford?
Yeah, no, he was the
the governor.
Yeah, governor.
So he actually wrote many pages in Hebrew and had a Hebrew dictionary so that people could look at it. And it was even thought to almost 2 times didn't get English as our official language. When they first come here, they were so religious, they thought about making Hebrew the national language. Yeah, and but all of that kind of got lost over most of your pastors were very well educated back in those days, but things got lost because you had the war and separation, and you had Western expansion, and then people missed a few things with the lack of education.
No, yeah, Hebrew was one of those languages that I know that alongside Latin and Greek being taught at universities. So I know, just for an example, because this is the first thing I think of, Immanuel Kant, right? Kant.
Yeah, man.
He had to study
skepticism
Hebrew alongside Greek and Latin, so it was one of those languages that were really, highly esteemed.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, I'm really interested in like the New Testament. Like that's like really interesting. Like, are all the connections or like the truths pointed toward Jesus also explained as it was in Isaiah 53 in the Old Testament? Could you like find that if you'd want?
Yeah, so if you go in depth study and you read, and it's very important that if you really want to make a real connection is the the version that was come out in 1611, which is called, most people call it King James Version, but it's really called the Authorized Version. It had a vast majority, had like started with 52 translators. One guy could read, no, could speak Hebrew at age 5, read it at age 6. The team that they put together was unbelievable. Like, I'll tell you how accurate it was in English. They had 3 camps: Oxford, Westminster, and Cambridge. They broke everybody up in 3 groups. There, you got a 1/3 of the Tanakh, 1/3 of the New Testament, then the second third, second third, third third, third third. Then they had to translate in their own handwriting. Then they come together as a group and did their third together. They solidified on what they thought, and then they sent theirs to the other 2 groups. So a minimum every verse has been examined 11 times.
So a lot of cross-examination to verify the truth.
And because of that, even Hebrew scholars in Israel will tell you it's the most Jewish of all the English translations. Plus, it's based on the root words of. I was actually explaining this to my church today. If you don't use.
Oh yeah, it's Sunday. Happy Sunday.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, I was telling them, I said, look, you can't go with modern English words or modern translation, because in my generation we'd say, oh, that's cool. Well, it's not talking about that, or they'll say, or you see something that's really cool, you go, man, that's bad. And it's not bad. It's the exact opposite. So,
No,
being a surveyor and dealing with a lot of attorneys, and I know, Stephen, your parents are attorneys. You change one word in a contract, and that contract's null and void. It's no more, and I've done tons of contracts. So, but anyhow, I was saying all that. If you'll get that and read that, and then you can trace that back to the Tanakh, because it's unbelievable the references that Jesus himself made to the Old Testament. And it just absolutely screams. And that was the thing that drawed me 20 years ago, and or 21 now, and I couldn't get away from it. And I mean, it just infused me. And I was like, I've got to know this. And I thought I was doing it just for my own ministry and for, to be able to teach my church better. And then it's like the 7th year, God opened every amazing door you can think of. Right now, we have a higher population of Jewish people than I know in my entire anywhere around here. I don't have a traffic light in my entire zip code, not a flashing light, my entire zip code. So how I got disconnected to Israel is a God thing. Is the 7th year. I mean, God's really put me in close contact with many, many Israelis, many famous Israelis, the military, the government. Matter of fact, the spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is a very good friend of mine, and I got to know him when he was a consul general there in Miami. But saying all that, yeah, if you're not checking the Old Testament when you're reading New Testament, you're going down the wrong road. So if you read that, and a lot of our best guides, when I take groups of people over to Israel, they have read the New Testament several times, and it helps them point out the Old Testament. So
it's just like supporting documentation almost with a new perspective.
Exactly. And so and when you read it, see, most people don't realize that the New Testament is a Jewish book. I mean, Jesus was 100% Jewish. Only one of the authors was a goy. They were all Jewish. And most people don't know that. And most Jewish people go, and when you tell them that, they go, you are kidding me.
I know.
It's like very counterintuitive.
It's crazy.
Exactly. And so, I just really fell in love with Israel. And I knew as a kid, I'll explain this. I knew as a small kid that nobody ever had to tell me the Bible was right or wrong. I just knew that. And when it said that Israel was a special place, okay, I'm in. I used to, when I was a little fella, I used to dream of getting in the Dead Sea. So my first trip over there, it was really cool to get to meet.
Yeah, dream
Yeah,
comes true,
it is.
literally.
And always being drawn to science and stuff like that. I grew up an only child, and I mean, we had lots of kids in the neighborhood. I mean, we live in such a rural neighborhood in town. We actually played football in the street. The edge of the pavement was the sideline. Every day we would play a type of
Yeah.
football in the street.
Yeah.
But that was a dream of mine because, okay, why do you float so well? Okay, Dead Sea's like 11 times more salt here than the ocean.
Yeah,
And so when I got there, that was a childhood dream for me. But yeah,
yeah, that's
love
really
Israel.
cool.
I love that place. Have you guys
Yeah,
been?
not
Yeah,
yet. I have not.
multiple times.
I have
Okay.
not. I was planning to go for the first time last year, but unfortunately because of COVID, I was unable to. But I am gonna go next year, hoping
Oh,
all goes
are
well.
you gonna
It's
go on birthright?
I will go to Birthright, but next year I'm going to the March of the Living.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well, I've got to
You honestly never know.
participate a little bit in the March of the Living. We actually, there was a guy who plays all over the world. His name's Ted Pierce. Y'all probably really enjoy his music. Ted Pierce, he's like a
Ted Pierce.
messianic guitar player.
Yeah.
He does a lot of songs, some have a lot of Hebrew in them. But they do the one where they do the big walk in Germany. And so the churches that participated in that, I got my church out and I stood on the bank above the church and we stood in the Star of David and sent that picture out so that we would participate in that.
No way. That's cool. So speaking of Israel, I was just wondering, given like your like involvement within Christianity, do you ever feel like ridicule when you express your involvement in Israel as a Christian? And if so, how do you respond? And what about Israel like drew you in? Like, why did you have that childhood dream of going into the Dead Sea? Was it purely because of your
The Bible, or maybe
or
something
like your
deeper?
love for science and
Yes to all of that.
uh and are there any other places in the world that provide a similar effect?
Okay. The Israel draw for me is very spiritual, and it is the most unique country in the world by far. I like, um, even though I guess you're probably enjoying my accent, I sound very country, southern, hillbilly-ish. I tell everybody I speak southern redneck Hebrew. Uh, my Israeli
Shalom.
friends absolutely love that. But anyhow, I I like the very much the intellect and and Israel and especially Jewish people who like to talk like you guys. I like the intellect. This is I was so impressed when you contacted me and so excited. And I told Miss Mom, I said, I'm impressed with even the email I got, how well you put that together and what you guys are doing is, and your openness to explore other things is really refreshing. So to answer your question on, yeah, Israel draws me like crazy. If it was so if I could get away from my business and my church for, for 6, 7 months, I'd probably go live in Israel for 6, 7 months. I usually try to stay 3 weeks to a month at a time when I go. I don't just take people. I have plenty of friends, and I like to go live there because when you stay like that, you really learn the people and the culture, and you make good friends, and you understand things, and you're off from the limelight and the show and the money, racket and all that. And we have really good trips. Don't get me wrong, but I get out in the with friends of mine. We go to Arab villages to eat. We meet everybody, and I have good friends who are Arabs over there too. Um, it's amazing. So yeah, that's a spiritual draw for me, a physical draw also. But the other place is yes, Walker is Scottish, and
Oh,
yeah, so probably the two greatest influences of ancient cultures are the Israelis by far,
and the
how
Loch
they
Ness
impacted the
monster.
world. But the Scots, you know about Hadrian's Wall, right?
Yeah, like of
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah, even the great Roman Empire could not defeat these people.
They
And
even told like stories of them. They had like I know they had also for the Britons, but they also like told how you know, it was like a magical place. They were all tough as nails and everything. It was
Yeah.
very
yeah, let me see if I can find this right here, right quick. A friend of mine sent me, met one day, and he sent me this little meme and or a little saying on the cell phone, and I'm like, that sounds like my family motto. So if I can get back to this right quick, you'll really like it. But yeah, Scotland. I actually give you a little background. I've been wanting to go to the Scottish Highland Games for decades, and I wanted to take my three sons, but there was always football and baseball and basketball, and so busy with them, I didn't get to go. So finally, I run into a friend of mine, and we're going to our first Highland Games. I bought my first kilt. I am ready to roll.
Is it? Do you know how to play bagpipe? The bagpipes?
No, I would love to, but I didn't realize they were so expensive and hard to learn to play.
yeah, it's a very difficult
But I did
all the
start
pipes.
playing the
Oh
guitar
yeah, I was.
when I started playing guitar when I was 50 though. So been trying to learn some Scottish songs here lately. But here it is. I am a Scot. I do not need your approval, your opinion, your attitude, or even your notice of me. I do, however, need you to step aside and get out of my way. Great things are in my immediate future. Watch me do exactly what you said I could not.
Wow. Can you send
Yeah.
that? Can you send that to me? I want to make that the thumbnail of this video.
Yeah, that's good.
So I mean, if you think about it, it's like it's real Jewish Israeli too. I mean, no people on in planet Earth have been more abused than Israelis. You know, are Jewish people, and it's like, you know, you guys are just tough. I mean, it's kind of like the Scots, and you know, and if you'll find about this, true Christians have always loved Israel. Those that come under the demise of Christianity and that have really went against has give a black eye and has tried to put the two opposing, and it's been exploited by both sides that on the negative end. But you think about it, every time that real believers and real Israelis, so to speak, or Jewish people are abused, they just thrive. I don't know why. Every time, if you look through history, if they're really under persecution, they end up thriving. I mean, look, because of the Holocaust, you have a country, an entirely Jewish state now, with an ancient language that is the only time in the history of the earth that has come back to life. This is a miracle. I mean, where are the Hittites, the Gittites, the Philistines, all them? Gone. And you know that the ancient language of the Scots is still being spoke by those who are trying, you know, to keep it alive.
Yeah, and like although
Gaelic, right?
fictional. Sorry, I was what?
Yeah,
Gaelic, right? Is that the
Gaelic. Yeah,
yeah?
Yeah, and like I know like it's fictional, but I remember when we read Macbeth, Oz, it's based in
Yeah.
Scotland, and even though Macbeth like becomes that king of Scotland through like obviously heinous ways that are not necessarily
yeah,
legal, he eventually gets overthrown, and the army of Scotland, the people of Scotland, end up taking their country back, tough as nails.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie? It's called it's I think it's called The Eagle, and it's about this Roman officer. You saw it, Oz? And anyhow,
Maybe.
yeah, that's pretty. It's a kind of a you kind of pull for the Romans on that one, and then if you go to Braveheart, you know you're
Yeah.
pulling for that. So Braveheart and Rob Roy, two good movies
Uh-huh.
to see.
Is
So
that the one with forget it, it's like Will, I think his name is.
Rob Roy is Liam Neeson, and Mel Gibson is in Braveheart.
Mm, yeah. Like going back to Israel, do you ever face like ridicule when you like express your like involvement in Israel like as a Christian? Ridicule from either like Christians or Jewish people, like where like no matter where, like do you just like face like criticism for supporting it, even though like it's usually not correlated to like.
Right. I'm gonna turn over here because there's sunlight coming in. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes, but the thing I found with being a pastor too, you do your homework, and it's kind of like a guy told my son one time playing baseball, said, if you want to play, you got to make them look stupid. So you can be kind about it, but if you know your stuff, if you're well studied, you know your stuff, then you have answers. And it's not that you're explaining anything, is that you got the facts. And no country on earth has touched the world like Israel. Take the people that hate Israel the most. What major hospital do they have? What major scientific discovery have they made?
Yeah.
What humanitarian group do they have? Do you know who shows up as much as the Americans do in a natural catastrophe? In
Israel.
Tibet and Nepal. 2 earthquakes.
Wow.
Who's there? The Israelis. Who showed up in South Florida when the building fell down? The Israelis. When Haiti was just about rolled off into the sea, Israelis. The Americans and the Israelis. And as Bibi said, America's like the new promised land.
Bibi Netanyahu, yeah.
Yeah. And so, what I was trying to think the other day, and I actually done in Hebrew in a speech one time to the Israeli parliament in South Florida. What is it? I was trying to find it the other day, that we thank God that we're here at this place and this time. Are y'all familiar with that Hebrew saying?
No, it reminds me of something. I know there's a name to it. I can't remember it right now, but yeah, it's like a common theme and a common saying.
Yeah, I think it's got Higanu in it, maybe. But anyhow, the first time I said that, we were doing a night to honor Israel in the big church there in South Florida, and I was like, well, they started quoting it with me, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I made a lot of good friends who have helped me over the years, like the guy that I call my Israeli father. He actually was in the Mossad in the '60s. I know a guy who's gotten the highest national award from Israel twice, and then he set me up with some people over in Israel, and I actually got to spend a day with some very interesting people. One of them was Yud Bet, the general of the Central Haru for 30 years. And my journey is a miracle. There's no way I could have tried or planned this on my own or anything for me. I mean, God worked this out for me, and it's amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I can write my life just in the last 20 years, and it's jaw-dropping.
That's cool. And just to like, Oz, do you have any questions?
No, not that I can think of. But you did a very good job explaining everything thoroughly.
Thank you. Yeah, and just like one more question to leave off, like, for like ourselves, like me, Oz, and like our viewers who like, I guess before this we have not had a non-Jewish video, so I assume a good portion of our viewers are Jewish, especially because I think we have like 20% of our viewers from Israel.
Yeah.
So yeah, for those and like a lot of others who are Jewish or just not Christian and want to like still like just understand more in depth like different faiths and spirituality outside of like the Old Testament, where do you recommend starting? Like I know we had talked about the New Testament, but like do I just like open up the New Testament book and just read like what do I do if I just want to like get a nice like feel out for like a taster, so to speak, for.
Okay, so are you guys familiar with the Secret Service?
The Secret Service, yeah.
Okay, so why and when was it started?
The CIA, I remember.
I think it was after Lincoln's death, or either Lincoln or McKinley, one of them.
You're exactly right. Lincoln started it because there was so much counterfeit money. It was about to destroy the whole republic. And see, most people think of the Secret Service to protect the president. That's just a very small thing they do. And if you walk up to somebody that's in counterfeiting in the Secret Service, you would ask them, say, I bet you study a lot of counterfeit money. I bet you that's amazing how much counterfeit. He said, no, we study the real thing. That way we know a counterfeit when it comes along.
Mm.
So to answer your question, if you just start and read the New Testament first and then do some research after that. And just remember that the Bible's written like a contract. What is contract? It's a covenant. A covenant is a contract with the greater dictating to the lesser what the terms and conditions are. So, being that said, if you read the authorized version, always remember that you is singular or plural. Ye is always singular, and thee and thou is plural, and that'll help explain some of the older words.
Yeah. And like, do you just recommend like directly just opening the New Testament, or is there like?
Just start right at the very beginning there in Matthew, and just take off reading. You'll find it interesting right from the beginning. You're going to go, okay, we're getting some Jewish genealogy right here.
Oh yeah, it was sort of like building off of that too. So between the Old and New Testament, if I'm reading it from Old and then I'm just continuing reading and then suddenly I reach New, does that piece things together more than if I just were to start at the beginning of the New Testament and read onwards, or is it the same experience?
Well, I'm sure you guys know this. Eastern thinking is not linear like Greeks or Westerners do. So you just kind of have to read it and take it in. Eastern thinking and the way the Bible's more circular, you have an idea and it branches off everywhere. And the New Testament do that. It's not really a chronological order. The first 4 books are different views of Jesus. In other words, same diamond, but 4 different facets on the diamond. If that makes sense. And that's one thing we know the authenticity of the Bible is because if you take 4 people in a crime scene and you separate them, they're going to have the same theme, but they view it in 4 different ways. You ever been in an auto accident? What do the police do first? They separate everybody
and then
ask
hear all the
everybody
different
what's going on.
stories. Yeah.
And it's kind of crime scene evidence on that. But yeah, just that first, and then you got resources like me. You can ask a few questions or whatever. But I'll tell you how strongly I view the Jewish people and Israel. And they know this very well, and I spoke to the Parliament, is that here's my statement. I would love you even if you didn't like me. That's how strong I feel about the Jewish state, Israel, Israelis, you guys. I mean, I'm just drawn to that. That's the way God says it's supposed to be, and I feel that in my heart very, very deeply. As you know, you can be put at arm's length in the Jewish community till they realize that they can trust you and you actually do love them. Because, I mean, you come with that stigmatism. That's the reason the Scots and the Scot-Irish that settled this area pretty strong back in early days, if a government shows up and says, we're here to help, and they go, oh, no, you're not, get down the road. We don't want any part of your help. And it's because the English had abused them so bad for so many years. We don't trust the government that well. And it can be that way a lot with Israelis, but once they understand that you really do love them, you really do care, and you want to be a part of their lives and friendships, I actually was very shocked. The Israeli Parliament, right about a month before COVID broke out, I went down and they asked me to explain Christianity, the different denominations, aspects of it, and everything, and it lasted a
That's
long
really
time.
cool.
Yeah, And I thought, well, you know, sometimes that gets a huge rejection. And I thought, you know, I've got to do what I got to do, even if these people don't like me anymore. And they didn't want to go home. And I mean, it's Shabbat too. It's Shabbat.
Yeah.
And there were questions and all kinds of stuff. And, you know, a lot of them were really good friends of mine too, that I've grown to really love and appreciate. But you know, when you've got a large diverse crowd here, and you know this, the vast majority of Jewish people are either atheist or agnostic. You know, yeah, we go to synagogue, and yeah, we do Passover, but are we really committed to the whole belief system or not? Are we keeping, you know, the law or whatever? And you know, it's like everybody else. Most people are nominal on what they believe, and they don't believe it to their core.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like that's what this whole like YouTube account is. What we're trying to do. We're trying to have people dig deeper, and we'll provide links and resources, free resources, in the description below where you can start this. Not only can you start this New Testament, but you can start the journey along with us. We can be reading the same text together.
Your mind and views.
Yeah, it's just very exciting. So Tim Tebow, you know who that guy is?
Yeah, the cute quarterback from Florida.
So I'm the type of person that I like to play sports, and I play for blood. But now watching, I'm not really interested in watching all sports. But my oldest son, when he was in high school, said, "Hey, there's this guy on TV, and he's wearing these Bible verses under his eye patch." So we got to watch the Tebow every week to see with our Bible to see what Bible verse he would have on that week.
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember him being a man of the people.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. If you go to the University of Florida, they have a statue outside of the football stadium, and he's got on the statues John 3:16 on here, the most famous Bible verse ever about Jesus and out of the New Testament. And they asked the president of the ACLU in Florida, said, "Do y'all guys not have a problem with that on separation of church and state and all that?" And they said, "No, that's who he really is. That's who he is." That's a big statement.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, my dad's first cousin actually went to Bible college with his mom and dad, and they said this person, that Tim is who he says he is. As a matter of fact, Audie Murphy, who wrote for Sports Illustrated for over 20 years, says he was the greatest ambassador warrior for his faith of anybody he'd ever interviewed at Sports Illustrated.
Wow. Yeah. So we'll provide that. Oz, do you have any finishing comments?
None other than, you know, we're glad that everyone's here to really share this journey with us of reaching outside of our comfort zone and